Welcome everyone to the Unitarian Church. My name is Michael Ziegler. We have the honor to all come together here to really honor, remember, and celebrate the life of our brother, Ralph Metzner. We gather here to bear witness to Ralph's transformation from an embodied being into a beloved ancestor. And this is really a conscious closing ritual that we can celebrate together as a community to accompany Ralph on his journey. Together we're going to spend this afternoon hearing stories about Ralph and his impact on many of our lives. We're reminded that this moment is an opportunity to reflect on our own mortality, an opportunity to deepen our own appreciation for the precious gift of an embodied life, knowing that everything we love will also pass away. You may have received a program that provides an overview of today's offerings, and we're going to be in this sanctuary for a while, so please take care of your needs. There are bathrooms on the far side, and remember to turn your cell phones off. After the gathering here, please join us for an informal reception in the social hall, which is on the other side of the building, where we'll continue to tell stories and turn our memories of Ralph into blessings. Okay, let's take a moment now to ground in this sacred space and deepen the felt sense of our presence together. I want to open this memorial using Ralph's own invocation of sacred space. I think there is no better way to open a memorial for Ralph than on the wings of his own prayers, and in the manner that he curated sacred space for so many people. We ask that we may be attuned and aligned with the great cosmic energies in our time together this afternoon. Having the intention of asking is the crucial step, because by asking, you make yourself receptive. We mindfully ask that we may be attuned and aligned as we first call upon the four directions. Great spirits of the East, O Grandfather Fire, the power of the rising sun, bringing new light, new vision, and inspiration. Great spirits of the South, O Grandmother Earth, spirits of the land, bringer of new life, bringing forth all nourishing, growing plants and creatures. Great spirits of the West, O Grandmother Ocean, the place of healing and peace, where all structures are dissolved. And great spirits of the North, O Grandfather Sky, spirits of the great winds, the breath of the earth that brings change, that brings movement and clarity and strength. We shift our attention now to tune into the spirits of this place, the people, flora and fauna that are native to this place. We acknowledge those who have lived here in the past and those who dwell here now in the present. We gather in this place, the Unitarian Church, at the western edge of North America, on our blue planet Earth, revolving around our sun, on the outer spiral arm of a galaxy that we call the Milky Way. We tune into the cycles of time, the season, the time of day, and where we are in the arc of our own lives. We turn our attention to the animal spirits with whom you've already connected and have a relationship with, and the other ones that you may want to have a relationship with. We invoke the spirits of the plants and the fungi, the plants that nourish us and give us strength to the body, the plants that heal us and still pain. We invoke the spirits of the plant and fungal teachers that help us to cleanse the lens of perception, helping us to know our place in the great web of life. We invoke all the spirits of nature. We approach them with an awareness of our interdependence with them, mindful of our mutuality, reciprocity, and intimate interconnectedness, a balance of giving and receiving. We honor the spirits of the ancestors, starting with our own forefathers and mothers, our hereditary genetic ancestors who provided us with a lineage, and we honor those ancestors and ask to be in continued relationship with them, and we ask that they may guide us. We ask to include here our spiritual ancestors, wise human beings and spiritual teachers who have inspired us or guided us with their wisdom, who have changed our lives, enriched our lives. And let's bring Ralph into our awareness here now. We bring in those beings for whom we will be the ancestors, our descendants and our students. Experience the continuity between our forefathers and foremothers, our forebearers, ourselves, and our descendants, and those we have mentored, our participation in the great chain of being. And the last group of ancestors that we invoke are all the gods and goddesses, the guiding spirits of whole peoples and cultures, and we ask to attune to those sacred entities with whom we each share a special relationship. And finally, we invite a big breath in to our heart center, and we ask to attune to the great spirit within, our wise soul that was never born and never dies. All right. How many of you heard Ralph do that invocation? What a beautiful. Kathy, Sophie, and I recently tuned in with Ralph, and I want to quote to you Ralph's report on the here now in the hereafter. I'm sitting here with my father Wolfgang, my mother Jill, my son Ari, and my great niece Susie. I send my blessings to my new grandson, Gratian Cole Jacobson. I'm sitting in the shade of the world tree. This part of the garden is next to Mimer's well, and it's filled with San Pedro cactus and has a comfortable hot tub. My pendulum doesn't work here, so I'm busy exploring new kinds of awareness practices. Perpetual love, bliss, indivisible is available, but there are so many things I have yet to discover. Nearby, I hear Rumi and Blake exchanging poems under the garden wisteria. George Gurdjieff is dancing the Enneagram on the lawn. Socrates has gone into the house for wine, leaving Leo Zeff, Carl Jung, Angie Arian to discuss the culture section of the Multiverse Tribune. Odin, Jehovah, Milarepa, Oshun, and Krishna are tag team wrestling on the lawn. Mozart will be collaborating with George Harrison and John Lennon for a noon concert in the Zocalo. At the gate to the temple, Timothy Leary and Terence McKenna are telling stories and have drawn a crowd. Inside the sanctuary, Russell Schofield is doing Agni Yoga while Maria Sabina chants and Michael Harner drums. In the laboratory up the hill, Sasha Shulgin and Albert Hoffman are inventing clever palindromes while crafting new tryptamines. Enkidu is explaining the politics of gender in Gilgamesh to Maria Gumbitas while Zachariah Sitchin listens on. This afternoon, Richard Wagner will premiere a new opera. Isis, Osiris, Anubis, and Sekhmet are playing themselves. In the evening, I'm making new alien friends from other galaxies. They bring to our conversations new, exciting perspectives about art, science, and the numinous. Later, emerging from the silence, a goddess will bring out a delicious tureen of my favorite tomato soup to share. I tell her I'm beginning to get a better sense of this dimension. She wants to hear. I tell her it begins with my appreciation of eternity. It begins with my appreciation of eternity.
Hi, I'm Kathy Coleman, Ralph's wife of 30 years. Greetings, everyone. I want to acknowledge various people attending the memorial today, and I'd like you to stand when I acknowledge you, groups. First, Ralph's half-siblings, Gunther, Otto, and Anna Metzner, are here from Germany. And then some of the other Metzner family members are here, Mark and Michael, his nephews, and his great-nephews, Max and Evan and Aiden, and Alex is part of the family too. Our babysitting co-op of 25 years. Important part of our family. Those of you who studied with him or were in his groups. You're probably all over the place. Just want you to have a look at each other. Great. Those of you from CIS, colleagues and students. Great. And those of you who traveled from out of state or out of the country to be here. Great. And all of you who consider yourselves part of his tribe and our tribe. Great. I am so glad to see you. This is what Ralph said to me so profoundly every time I came home this past year after the diagnosis of his illness. And I heard him say it to others who came to visit him. So I want you to look around at your friends and loved ones in his honor and say, I am so glad to see you. I had the honor and privilege to walk with Ralph on numerous paths. As his student, as administrative colleagues at the California Institute of Integral Studies, CIIS, as co-founders of the Green Earth Foundation, as fellow journeyers and experimenters, as co-parents, and as his spouse. I first met him when I became a doctoral student at CIIS in 1981. Ralph was my teacher for basic counseling skills, Eastern personality theories, esoteric personality theories, alchemy, astrology, altered states of consciousness, and the final integrative seminar before dissertation writing. I mentioned these classes by name to demonstrate his breadth of knowledge. He also taught group dynamics, research methodology, and ecology, among other things, eco-psychology. While I began as a student in the counseling psychology program, I later changed to the East-West psychology program, which Ralph founded. In 1982, I was hired on staff at CIIS as Director of Admissions and Financial Aid. I was then promoted to Director of Student Services and later Dean of Students. Ralph was the academic dean. For a decade, Ralph led the academic side of CIIS, and I directed the administrative student services side of the institution. This work relationship was our first alchemical union. In the midst of this strong work together, we became partners in 1986 and married in 1988. Ralph's contributions at CIIS were multidimensional and profound. First, he was an outstanding professor and well-published. Second, he was a courageous, sound administrator. He maintained a well-balanced budget in the face of limited funding during his entire administrative tenure, and he was a strong leader. Finally, perhaps the most important contribution was his appetite for innovation and experimentation. Ralph's pioneering spirit, His strong, grounded administrative capability and his intelligence and knowledge about Western and Eastern systems of thought contributed a great deal to the flourishing of the innovative California Institute of Integral Studies. I have received numerous messages the past 2 months since Ralph died from people reflecting on what Ralph gave them, or taught them, or meant to them. I've chosen to share one from Fariba Bagzaran, a dream researcher, author, and artist who is one of his students at CIIS. She wrote, "Ralph was a very important mentor to me. When I started at CIIS in 1986, he was the academic dean, and he was the only person at school with whom I could share my ideas about lucid dreaming and transpersonal experiences. He was wholeheartedly supportive of me doing my thesis on this topic when no one else understood what I was doing. I wanted to do qualitative research for my subject, but he strongly was against it. He said, 'The topic is obscure, and if you do a method that is not fully accepted, no one would take you seriously.' He encouraged me to use hard science for my research, and he was right. As soon as I finished my study, it was recognized immediately. As a visionary, it was a struggle for me to go to school, but Ralph was always there to discuss the most unusual subjects. I feel grateful to have had him as my mentor." Fariba's message illustrates several things we know about Ralph. You could talk to him about any far-out topic. He would think about it and encourage you to do your best work that would have the most far-reaching, effective results, and he would be right. And he would continue to be your loyal colleague, collaborator, and friend. Ralph went on an intentional vision quest before our marriage to obtain a vision for our marriage. Now, how awesome is that? I recently found a letter in which he wrote about this vision. While in the mountains, I'm asked to go on 2 symbolic walks to obtain a vision for my upcoming marriage to Kathy. In the first, I am to test my commitment to her by climbing down a steep and rocky canyon and find her spirit. Finding her and the commitment was easy. The second was a repeated walk in the day and at night along a high ridge to find my vision for our relationship. The path wound through cool, shade-giving clumps of trees and across sunny, open meadows covered with wildflowers. I talked with her in my mind. Her soul is as a field of wildflowers. I saw us walking together, meeting and interacting with many other individuals and groups, working in creative collaboration, dancing in ritual play. Togetherness in open space was the mantric marriage formula I was given. I danced for my love. Kathy liked the marriage walk vision, so we traveled together in open spaces. From my prior marriage, I had a son, Eli, who was a toddler when Ralph and I got together. In 1989, Ralph and I had a daughter, Sophia Maria, named after Maria Gimbutas, one of his teachers and mentors. Ralph was a loving, encouraging parent. Ralph and I had uncommon, common interest, and there was no topic, esoteric, alien, or otherworldly, that was too mysterious for us. However, sometimes collaborating on ordinary, mundane affairs was much more difficult. But we got better with it over time. As a husband, Ralph was devoted, kind, grateful, and always interesting. We both led strong, independent, creative lives while we walked together solidly in partnership. I'm grateful for the special privilege I had to be his spouse and to experience him in so many other ways. Ralph completed 3 books the 2 years before he died. Ecology of Consciousness was his magnum opus, a collection of his writings and teachings over the years. Overtones and Undercurrents was a collection of spiritual overtones and karmic undercurrents from his casebook. And Searching for the Philosopher's Stone is a sort of autobiography of some of his personal encounters with some of the special people in his life. He wrote a total of 24 books in his lifetime, which are displayed in the reception area. Ralph was intent about settling his library before he died. With the help of Betsy Gordon and her foundation, and the fact that Purdue University houses the Betsy Gordon Psychoactive Substances Archives, Purdue University agreed to take his books on numerous topics, including psychedelics, as the Ralph Metzner collection. Our daughter Sophia and I worked on packing and shipping his books to Purdue. The night before he died, I said to him, "The shelves are clear, and the last 10 of 44 boxes are ready to ship tomorrow." He put his hands together and said, "Thank you. I am so grateful." This was the last act that he wanted to complete before he died, to ensure that his library was settled. This was one of many examples that seemed to indicate that his death was well-timed with the completion of his life and work. There are many things Ralph leaves us as his legacy. I will name 3. He always said that one must honor any vision, dream, or special message from the divine and act upon it. By honoring the messages, one would continue to receive divine guidance, and we did. Second was to forgive and ask for forgiveness. We practiced apologizing and forgiving in our family and cleaned up the rough patches as we went along. The third I will mention is gratitude. Especially this last year of Ralph's life, he expressed profound gratitude toward everything in his life. He was soft, open, and sweet the closer he drew to death. I miss our daily connection, his voice, his laughter, and his hugs, and yet I am eternally grateful for the life I shared with him. I wish him well in this next phase of his journey. I want to close with this excerpt from John O'Donohue's blessing on the death of the beloved. "Let us not look for you in memory, where we would grow lonely without you. You would want us to find you in presence, beside us when beauty brightens, when kindness glows, and music echoes eternal tones. When orchids brighten the earth, darkest winter has turned to spring. May this dark grief flower with hope in every heart that loves you. May you continue to inspire us."
Wow. Yeah, I'm just going to have to take a second to stabilize myself up here. I'm Diane Haug. I come down off the mountain from New Mexico to be here. I'm an introvert. I'm an introvert with a vocal disorder, and I am certainly a woman who has never spoken behind a podium of this nature in a setting like this. So that's the process I'm going through now, is just kind of returning to my body. This is a very kind of breathtaking experience for me today. I live quietly. I'm seeing people here that I've had relationship with for 30, 40 years, and it's happening all at once. So I feel very honored to be in this position, and I'm sensing all of the people behind me that I represent in terms of my relationship with Ralph, who was a very important mentor in my life, a teacher, a friend, an older brother, a colleague, and a co-conspirator. I like that word. So I want to start with that. I actually met Ralph in the early 1990s, so we didn't go way, way back, but maybe 1990, 91. I met him at an ITA. Some of you might remember the International Transpersonal Association conferences, and I realized I actually want to refer to my notes, because left to my own devices, I may not communicate to you the talking points that are most important to me today. So I heard Ralph lecture, and I certainly knew something about him and his place in the history of transpersonal psychology. But I actually didn't know him well. I can't remember the name of the talk. But the concept was, what he was communicating with great passion was just this need to revision psychology. He talked about a green psychology and actually looking at the wisdom of the natural world to inform all of us in terms of the art and practice of psychotherapy. And that was really stunning for me. I had not received a transmission around the emerging field of eco-psychology. And Ralph actually brought that to me, and I so appreciated him for that. I actually was a woman who, in her early 40s, chose to go on a nature sabbatical, personal sabbatical that lasted 5 years in a very remote setting. So I felt such resonance with what he was saying. I asked him if we could have a cup of tea. We did. I asked him if he'd come to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and do a lecture there. He said he would. And beyond that, he was so willing, to my great delight, to spend more time there. And we visioned a land-based residential opportunity for a small group of journeyers, and it was really something. So at that time, his life had been tempered by some experiences with traditional cultures in this country and in other countries, and it's already been referenced today by Kathy, the imprint that the Vision Quest model, a la the School of Lost Borders, had on Ralph. So for the next, it's probably been about 25 years. We didn't see each other often, but we saw each other on a regular basis, maybe once a year, twice a year. And we began to really craft a residential format for people who actually wanted to come together and do deep exploration in a natural setting. The work grew, and our relationship grew as well. So I met Ralph originally. I recognized him as an academician, a scholar, but what really spoke to me was his belief in ritual and ceremony. And I think I started feeling really much more comfortable when Michael did that beautiful opening. Thank you so much for that, Michael. I just got a high sign that my 3 to 5 minutes were probably, so I'm going to skip ahead in terms of my remarks. So here's this really quite rational man, really brilliant intellect, a lot of scholarship behind him, but he believed in the invisible world. And I just really love that about Ralph. And he always took the time, as Michael so beautifully modeled today, he took the time to honor the spirit of the place, the spirit of the times, the ancestors, those to come, and the value of cultivating conscious relationships with helpers and allies of all forms. I considered Ralph actually to be the master, with a capital M, of the guided journey. His alchemical divinations were just, I think, quite brilliant. I think, again, fast forwarding, Ralph and I had personal conversation about 3 years ago. I remember it starting really explicitly about how he might begin to think about crafting his own death. I felt really quite honored to be a part of the conversation. He knew I had some professional background as a younger person with end-of-life care, and we began to talk about these things. I think those of us who were working with him in groups could also notice that in his beautiful guided work around the life cycles in general, that he was more and more leaning into these really detailed practices related to end of life. Where would you like to be? With whom would you like to be? Tell me about the ambiance, the setting. What kind of place or atmosphere would you really be comfortable leaving your body in? And so for, I think, those of us who worked with him on a regular basis, it really felt very literally like he was beginning to, well, we all were, but I could feel it. I sensed, we all sensed, that he knew he was approaching the end of his life. So this felt like practice. It felt like preparation. It felt like rehearsal in some way. Kathy has been so generous in her sharing about his last weeks, his last days, his last hours, and I wasn't there. But from what I understand of her sharing, Ralph was really walking his talk in that time. Dying is not an easy thing, as we all know. It's so much like coming into this world. There's labor involved, for sure. But as Kathy reflected so beautifully, I got the sense that when the time came, his worldly business was pretty complete, except those 3 books that will still be published posthumously. He was quite a writer. But that his intention was clear. He reported to the family, I'm ready to die. It's going to happen today. Well, it took another 24 hours, but he knew he was on that final trajectory. I think he had, from what I heard, a very felt sense of being connected with his ancestral clan. And I also want to mention that many of us got a letter from him in, I think it was June of 2018. It was just after the diagnosis of the pulmonary fibrosis. And from that point on, he began to describe the condition of his lungs. He used the metaphor of tattered sails, like the sails on a sailboat. He imagined his lungs to be tattered sails. So when the time came for him, I imagined, I have this strong felt sense that as he tracked, which I'm sure he was doing, tracked his own diminishing breath, those tattered sails carried him home. I'm almost there, but this is important for me to communicate also, to feel complete about this. Ralph, super creative human being. Most of you know, or you should know, that in addition to writing, he was also a musician, a poet. He produced with friends several CDs. And if you are a fan of Ralph Metzner, you need to have a CD called Spirit Surroundings, in my humble opinion. And there's one track in particular, it's a 4-minute track, that I feel really was a succinct reflection of his own personal journey through the cycles of life. And at the end of that cut, that 4-minute track, which is called The Life Cycle Medicine Wheel, he repeats 4 phrases again and again and again and again. And these are the phrases: no regret, no blame, no struggle, and no boundary. No regret, no blame, no struggle, no boundary. I feel like that was the mantra. This is my fantasy, but I feel that was the mantra he moved through, he was working with through his dying process. And certainly a profound transmission for those of us who were able to witness that or be a part of that in some way. So I'm so grateful of those decades that we had together in terms of exploring the inner landscape, of remembering where we came from, remembering where we're going. And that relationship just had a profound, my life was enriched by knowing Ralph. So thank you. Again, a great privilege and honor to introduce another one of my important mentors who is still here with us, thank the goddess. Stan Groff is here with his wife, Brigitte, and would it be possible to stand? Can you do that, Stan? Yeah. So we're really gifted by Stan's presence today. And I just want to mention that most of you know that Stan actually experienced a stroke last August, and he's, from my perception, just doing great with his recovery. His spirits are high, his life force is good. They're trying to get to Tonga to swim with the humpback whale sometime in the near future. So he's in a good place. But his rehabilitation has had to do with reading and writing and speaking. So Brigitte and Stan came up with a really clever way to craft a contribution to this gathering. They sent it along. And what we're going to hear, the audio of, is a reflection from Stan in relation to his experience and life with Ralph as a friend, as a colleague, as a brother. So we're going to hear that now, and Stan is here with us.
Ralph played an important role in the current psychedelic renaissance. Before it even began, one of the important things that he did was to study new and not yet illegal or semi-illegal medicines, or those that it was possible to use them because of various legal holes. He also followed groups in the United States and Europe who believed that psychedelics were helping their patients, and for that reason they did not respect ignorant legislation. This way, Ralph introduced therapists and interested public to useful knowledge of MDMA in his book Through the Gateway of the Heart, under the name of Sophia Adamson. He also published a field report of the underground research of tryptamines, DMT, and 5-methoxy-DMT under the name the Toad and the Jaguar. This information is very important because 5-methoxy-DMT has in the last years become popular in the forms of the toad Bufo alvarius. It is also very likely that 5-methoxy-DMT will be in the near future a useful therapeutic agent, as it has with another substance, MDMA, that was wrongly for the length time placed on schedule number 1. In Ralph, the world has lost an invaluable defender of the world peace and of our planet. He was a global citizen and had a passion for ecology and love for the earth. He died peacefully after he completed his books that he wanted to finish. He organized his writings and sent his legacy to the International Psychedelic Library and Archive of Purdue University. A few months ago, Ralph and I realized that we had known each other over half of a century, since 1965. I participated and presented at the Amityville conference entitled The Use of LSD in Psychotherapy and Alcoholism. After his conference, I needed to get to New Haven, where I was invited to Ruth and Theo Litz, researchers of schizophrenogenic mothers and fathers. I needed to get to New Haven, and I did have no money. At the end, at the conference, I went to the microphone and asked if anybody could give me a ride. One of the participants offered me a lift. His name was John Peter. During these decades, we were part of an alchemical conspiracy. We tried our substances, shared inner and external journeys, exchanged our books, participate in an excellent month-longs, in many numerous ITA conferences all over the world, and in our parties. 3 years ago, when Brigitte and I got married, she joined Ralph and Kathy in our circle, who shared our worldview, vision, and mission. Brigitte created regular costume parties in which our transpersonal friends meet in our house. Ralph and Kathy participated in the last meeting. 5 of our passed away members were represented by their photographs and by flowers on a little table. In our future party, there will be 2 more photographs, Michael Harner and Ralph. We miss them very much. It crossed our mind that our good friends join our parties in alternate realities.
Shared this song quite a bit. I know he was very in his twinkly way, and me with this. He's very interested in this exact moment, what it would be. So I know he's very alive in it, as we all know. So he's resting on all of our hearts. Let it go. Rest on my heart. heart of gold. Precious molten flowing gold. And on that dawn upon the Ganges, float your flower. Let it go. The current is swift. Let your gift drift slowly over words till it's only all heaven knows. Going over the horizon toward the sea for its holy hours. On that dawn upon the Ganges, float your flower. Let it go. Rest on my heart. Your heart of gold, precious molten flowing gold. And on that dawn upon the Ganges, float your flower. And let it go. The current is swift. Let your gift drift slowly opening upward until it's only all heaven knows. Going over the horizon toward the sea for its holy hours. On that dawn upon the Ganges, float your flower.
So my name is Alan Levin, and I'm really grateful, honored to be able to talk about the first 10 years of my relationship with Ralph. However, although there are many personal stories I could share, I want to tell more about what I witnessed of Ralph's life during this particular time, this particular 10 years. In 1968, Ralph took the suggestion of a friend and went to see a man in Southern California, Russell Schofield, who he was told might help him through some of the things that all his psychedelic work and study of Eastern spirituality had not. Russell had developed a teaching he called Agni, or light fire yoga, and had founded a school for teaching it called the School of Actualism. Ralph later called Actualism a modern-day school of alchemy. Its teachings involved tapping into sources of light fire energy from within, such as the one above the head, and bringing that down through the body, purifying the earth elements of the body and the planet. I'm quite sure some of you, or many of you, have been guided by Ralph through that process, which Russell referred to as earthing. Ralph became a devoted student of Russell's and viewed him as a true clairvoyant and channel of wisdom and light. He always showed great respect and deference, even when it seemed to go against his own ideas, believe it or not. It will surprise many of you to know that Ralph did what he was told during this time, for the most part, and more of that later. He became the principal emissary for bringing Russell's teachings out into the world and was most responsible for the expansion of the School of Actualism to having teaching centers in Costa Mesa, Los Angeles, San Diego, New York, Dallas, and finally San Francisco. Throughout his time in Actualism and up until the last couple of very difficult, and I would even say traumatizing years, Ralph traveled near and far, offering lectures and workshops on astrology, the I Ching, alchemy, maps of consciousness, always with the aim of introducing people to Agni Yoga and the School of Actualism. He did this while living in a bakery truck outside the Schofield's home while he was writing maps of consciousness, while being the chief psychologist at Fairview State Hospital for the mentally disabled, while directing an alternative high school, Star Mountain School, in Mountain Center, and again living in Valley Center to work with Russell on further never-published writings related to various myths, legends, and esoteric ideas. Ralph later shared some of these manuscripts with me, and I saw how much of it found its way into his later books and the divinations, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. It was during this period that his son Ari, at age 8, was killed in a bicycle accident, what Ralph described as the greatest tragedy of his life. Ralph had been traveling back and forth to San Francisco, developing an Actualism center there, and it was then that he met and started his relationship with Anjali Zarian and also started teaching at CIIS. In the end, his willingness to challenge the rigidity of the school as an institution and culture led to him receiving a great deal of verbal abuse and eventually being accused directly of being what was called a dark force channel. Given Actualism's stated mission of bringing the light into the world, this became a truly mythic battle of light versus dark, good versus evil, soul-searching that almost broke him. Sometime after the dust settled, he shared with me about the healing work that allowed him to resolve things for himself. He spoke of it later with great humor and forgiveness. The healing process involved the use of the very same light fire tools and methods that we had learned from our association with Russell Schofield and the School of Actualism, now aided by the sacramental use of entheogens. Actualism had taken on many of the cult-like separative qualities that many spiritual groups succumb to. One of these was that it was the way rather than a way. One of Ralph's most emphatic teachings became exploring and honoring the multiplicity of paths to liberation and wholeness, and he often emphasized that even entheogens are only one pathway among many. The 10 years spent in actualism were for Ralph, I believe, a journey of immense discovery and learning at every level, and formed the basis for a great deal of his practice and teaching for the next 40 years. I think it's very revealing that Ralph said in his 2017 book, The Ecology of Consciousness, 37 years after leaving the school, that he has used the light fire tools every day since. Thank you, and thank you, Raul, for your presence.
Hi, I'm Jan Edel, or Jan Stein, but not Jan Edelstein. So I randomly first met Ralph at a wedding reception in 1985. And Kathy was there with baby Eli in tow. And Richard and I had baby Ben, whose middle name is Eli, back at home with the babysitter. Over the years that followed, we circled through familiar tribal tromping grounds. And many years later, in 2004, Ben and Eli would head off to the same college, and Kathy and I would bond as their moms, driving them off to Olympia, Washington in tandem, and our families began to intertwine as Ben and Eli bonded and were even housemates for a while. We'd join in those lovely Metzner Christmas gatherings where Ralph introduced me to the nuances of absinthe and grilled me endlessly on the intimate experiences I had recently had in the Sonoran Desert encountering a certain species of toad. He was always warm, generous, open-hearted, and a twinkle in his eye. So my first round of empty nester syndrome found me stepping into the shoes of Alan Levin to take over the helm of Holos Institute, which is a nonprofit counseling and educational center based on the principles of ecopsychology. Alan let me know that Ralph was a close friend and also a supporter of Holos and ecopsychology. Now, while Ralph's fame is based on studies of psychedelics and explorations of consciousness, I believe he was first and foremost a clinical psychologist, and his orientation overarchingly ecological. Let's not forget that his website is named the Green Earth Foundation, and in 1999 he published a book called Green Psychology, Transforming Our Relationship to the Earth. So I invite you to imagine Ralph standing here quite dapper in his iconic cap and his colorful vest, speaking in his soft lyrical voice. Green psychology, transforming our relationship to the earth. We are talking about a fundamental re-envisioning of what psychology is or what it should have been in the first place, a revision that would take the ecological context of human life into account. I invited Ralph to come and speak at the very first Holos fundraiser that I ran when I stepped into Holos, and I asked him to talk about ecopsychology. He landed at the Oakland Center with stacks of his newly published book on psilocybin mushrooms, spoke briefly about the power of a mycelium universe, and then burst into a series of songs that engaged the audience in a sing-along. It was at that moment that I realized Ralph showed up as Ralph. He was in the moment, tuned in, free-spirited, wild and exuberant, loving and generous and wildly entertaining. I learned to let go and surrender to the moment and not care if my potential donors had judgments about psychedelics. This was Ralph. He was energetic, enthusiastic, and generally all over good vibes. But underneath everything was his comprehension of an ecological consciousness and what was happening on our planet. So I ask you to consider the arc of Ralph's life work and to see embedded in it at the root of absolutely everything he spoke about as an ecological perspective. He was truly one of the early writers and thinkers of ecological awareness. He had a comprehension of ecological awareness that permeated every nuance of thought. His earliest works were truly the leading edges of the newly emerging field of ecopsychology. Ralph named the urgent need for human consciousness to shift from its Cartesian roots to an ecocentric, interdependent web consciousness. He delineated this need from many angles, both psychological and spiritual. And in reviewing all of his prolific writing, I see this theme in absolutely everything he's written, and right down to his latest publication of Ecological Consciousness, which describes his broad vision of the human consciousness as evolutionary and ecological. He had the extraordinary capacity to see this interconnected dimension and apply it to all levels of human consciousness. He held a profound awareness of our ecological dilemma. His legacy calls forth a deep ecology that I sincerely hope will permeate our lives and consciousnesses for many decades. And I am deeply honored to have known Ralph. So thank you.
I'm Eli, Ralph's stepson. Ralph's been my stepfather longer than I can remember and was a very influential person in my life. We've all known Ralph in different capacities as a family member, friend, teacher, healer. My relationship with him included all these elements, but his role as a healer and nurturer was a special role that he took pride in and that was especially important to me. I would often go to him if I wasn't feeling well, and he'd dig into his homeopathy kit and carefully choose the right remedy and hand over a couple of little sugar pellets, which usually seemed to help. Growing up, my mother worked in the city and was often out of the house before any of us woke up. So Ralph was the one to get me ready for school each morning. And waking me up was a serious challenge. But Ralph came up with a really clever and gentle way to get me up. He'd often come into my room with a warm washcloth and put it on my face. Then I'd have a few minutes to get up, or he'd return a second time with that same washcloth, but it wouldn't be quite as warm. And then if I still wouldn't get up after the third time, then it would be cold, but we tried not to ever have to resort to that. Ralph loved animals, and we always had really cool pets. We had dogs, cats, a rabbit, a lizard, a fish tank, and a toad. My first dog was Ralph's dog. Her name was Molly, and she was really strong when she was in her prime. I remember she'd drag me around when we went for walks. And when she got old and became time to put her down, Ralph talked to me about it first, and he asked me if it was okay to put her down before he took her to the vet. And that was a conversation that's always stuck with me. It meant a lot that he asked that. Years later, we got the toad, and I didn't think of it much about it at the time because we always had animals, and Ralph liked toads. It wasn't until I was a little older and I saw an episode of The Simpsons that I figured out what the toad was all about. He was a really cool toad. His name was Buffo, which made a lot of sense in retrospect once I understood why we had him. I got to do a lot of traveling because of Ralph. We went on some unforgettable trips, including being in Germany near one of the border crossings the day the Berlin Wall came down. Ralph made sure to help me understand the significance of the situation in a way that my 4-year-old self could. I remember we celebrated with ice cream. We celebrated every day with ice cream, actually. We went on incredible trips to Ireland and Brazil for conferences he was involved with, and while in Brazil at age 12, he took me to do ayahuasca with him in a Santo Daime church deep in the Amazon rainforest. We went on unforgettable family trips to Costa Rica and most recently to Hawaii to bliss out, as he liked to put it. I feel lucky to have gotten the opportunity to work with Ralph recently on an online course, which was one of the final courses he taught. He enlisted my help to handle the technical and administrative aspects of the course, which was titled Understanding and Navigating Your Soul's Journey from Before Birth to After Death, in which he described the 6 phases of a soul's journey through human life. He loved teaching, and he couldn't travel as much, so he embraced technology and learned how to teach online, because Ralph was always moving forward. The topic of birth, death, the afterlife, and reincarnation were important to him and were central themes in his teachings. His understanding of these stages of life have helped an incredible number of people who have lost loved ones. They've also provided me with a perspective on life and death that has helped me to cope with losses and ease my own fears of death. I never met my older stepbrother, Ari, Ralph's son, who passed away in a tragic accident as a young boy, but I do feel a connection to him. Ralph would often tell me stories and share pictures of Ari as I played with some of his toys as a kid. And since losing Ari and dealing with his own trauma and grief, Ralph was able to help many people who experienced similar trauma. As Ralph's body began to decline during the last few weeks with us, he took some extraordinary steps to prepare to exit this stage. He wrapped up the writing projects he was working on, donated his incredible collection of books, and made connections with several family members and friends. During the last few weeks of his life, my wife Sabrina and I welcomed our first son, Gratian, into the world. Our last 2 conversations with Ralph were over video chat, where we introduced him to his new grandchild. Ralph expressed absolute elation and joy in getting to see him. Ralph's reaction to meeting Gratian on video chat was really incredible. He was full of energy and light. He welcomed his new grandson into the world as he was preparing to leave us all, and that conversation is one I will never forget. He spoke of the great joys of parenthood, as well as the sadness he shared, some of his experiences of being a parent with such enthusiasm and joy for this new life. I have a lot to be thankful for Ralph for. He was always very kind and generous to me and treated me as if I were his own son. Our relationship was really wonderful, and I'm grateful for Ralph's presence in my life. He taught me a lot about being a father, and that I hope I can pass on to my own son. So thank you, Ralph, for all you've taught me, for all your healing energy, and for helping me understand the stages of life. Until we meet again.
Greetings, everybody. I'm Michael Metzner, Ralph's nephew, and I'm going to first read a message from my sister Veronica, who lives in France with her family and could not be here today, and then I'll add a few words of my own. So the following is from Veronica. Thank you, Kathy, Sophia, and Eli, for allowing me to share in this celebration of Ralph's life. Please know that my heart is with you, even though I am in France with my little ones. I'm going to miss my Uncle Ralph, his kind and gentle presence, his positive energy, his curiosity, his healing presence. I'm going to miss him so much. Growing up, I always knew Ralph as a quirky, thoughtful, and nurturing person who brought a rare sense of calm and contemplation to family gatherings. I remember how much my parents liked his visits. He was engaging but gentle, which was especially nice for my ever-anxious mother. And I always enjoyed having a fellow vegetarian ally who also happened to consistently have a joint on hand. I didn't know my sister actually did that. Okay. You learn something new every day. Our families had many fun vacations together. My memories of Uncle Ralph go back to my toddlerhood, but our most important bonding occurred just in the last 4 years during the greatest suffering of my life. Ralph, like me, experienced the worst fate imaginable for a human, losing a child. In his case, he lost his young son, Ari, in an accident when Ari was just a boy. And when I lost my perfect, beautiful little girl, Susie, in a similar accident, Ralph was uniquely capable of the human connection I needed. We shared many moments together after Susie died, and he lent me much wisdom and spiritual guidance. One of the most important ideas that I picked up from him was that surviving the greatest suffering requires a transformation of grief into love, despair and longing into admiration and appreciation, and we must be ever grateful for the profound magic and beauty that is getting to love someone deeply in our life. I know that as Ralph said goodbye to his life on earth, he found peace in knowing how much he loved the people closest to him and how those people, Kathy, Ari, Eli, and Sophia, gave his life great meaning. So that wraps up Veronica's comments. Here are mine. While I've known Ralph my whole life, I spent more time with him over the past couple of years than in all previous years combined when we resided on different coasts. Much of that time together was spent visiting with my father, Ralph's older brother, Ken, who has advanced dementia and is in memory care in Marin. Aside from admiring his many professional accomplishments, which have been very well delineated here, I came to know Ralph as a kind, thoughtful, and loving brother and uncle. He was great with my dad, always gentle, patient, and attentive. He always brought his electronic writing tablet, which he purchased to better communicate with Ken, who is hard of hearing. He's very proud of that tablet. He never ceased to tell me it cost him only $25 when I was holding my much more expensive iPad. He's very proud of that. And with the help of a simple hand-drawn family tree that he created, Ralph would point out where he and I fit in the wider family context. My dad would smile as recognition kicked in most of the time. And with tears in his eyes, he'd grab his younger brother by his arms and embrace him closely. Ralph and I had long talks about life while walking with Ken on the path outside where he stayed. Ralph always had interesting advice for me, much of which involved going on a vision quest. So that's something I still need to fulfill. Sometimes we would meet for lunch beforehand, and Ralph would dangle the pendulum, the crystal, hanging around his neck over the menu to determine what to order. Interestingly, I noticed that when it came to ordering dessert, the crystal always seemed to signal its approval of the creme brulee. So, the crystal don't lie. My brother Mark and I were fortunate to visit one last time with Ralph and Kathy at their home in Sonoma the Sunday before Ralph passed on. While his breathing was quite shallow and labored, he was able to engage and was gracious as always and genuinely happy to be with us. He walked us through a family album from his early childhood with all his German relatives back many generations, and was quite animated in telling us about each of the relatives in the photos. I will miss my Uncle Ralph a lot and feel blessed that I was able to spend as much time as I did with him these past few years. Thank you all.
So my name is Charlie Grobe. I've known Ralph for more than 30 years. And during that time, he's been a great friend, great teacher, and a great mentor. I've learned more than I can say, and he was also a great inspiration to fulfill my life's dream, which was to get involved formally with the research of psychedelics. Ralph was always extremely generous with his time and his knowledge. I'll mention the time when the occasion I first met Ralph in 1988. Our mutual friend Roger Walsh had suggested to me and suggested to my friend Gary Bravo that we conduct a series of interviews with the elders of psychedelic research to make sure we could retain their knowledge, their experiences, and really help it to become a foundation for a new generation. Through Gary, we arranged to meet with Ralph, and we met Ralph. We at his home. This was in 1988. We sat down, and for 2 hours we had the most fascinating conversation. And Ralph we were tapping into what he just loved to talk about, and we were great listeners, and it was just remarkable. It was just really a manifestation for me of a life's dream. But at the end of those 2 hours, I realized we had neglected to turn on our tape recorder. So, but I got to hear it all again many times over. Ralph actually didn't want to be identified as an elder. He was pretty clear about that. But he was more than happy to introduce us to elders and to accompany us as we conducted our interviews and to play a major part in those interviews. So that was really a great joy to work with Ralph in that endeavor. I also had the opportunity to participate in many of the groups Ralph ran, and I learned really a great deal about how to keep a safe space, the importance of containment and being respectful towards others. Some of the group were sometimes a little irked that Ralph would impose rules like stay in your own space, don't talk till the staff comes to you. But I really appreciated that. I really appreciated some order and even a little discipline, and maybe that has to do with the fact that I have a German parent also. But in those contexts, I learned about safety. He also, in many respects, introduced me to the realm of the spirits and how to communicate with the spirits and how to ask for guidance and really direction and healing. And years later, when I had the opportunity to conduct a formal approved research study on using a psilocybin treatment model with people with advanced cancer anxiety, I felt after the first few subjects we treated that it was a little dry. I mean, we were also working in a hospital. We would fix up the room nicely, but still I felt there was something missing. And then I realized what it was. The spirits were not included in the structure we were putting together. So even though it didn't go into my protocol submitted to the FDA, hence on I asked each of the subjects, would they mind if we did a little ritual calling in the spirits of the 4 directions and the upper realms and the lower realms? And I just found it really gave so much more to the context and created more the setting for which it was meant to be. So, and I would bring in Ralph in the process, talk to the subjects about Ralph, and he was in there with us as we conducted the work. I also want to mention that, in many respects, the field of psychedelic research is flourishing once again, finally. But in so many ways, Ralph created the foundation. And without Ralph, I don't think we would have been able to get to the point we've got. Not only the vital work he did back starting in 1960 with his colleagues at Harvard and his contribution to the renowned book, The Psychedelic Experience, and his work as editor of the Psychedelic Review, and his and the research studies he participated in. But he's also had a huge impact on the current generation of researchers. And he's been a great friend to many of us, a great guide, a great mentor, and always encouraging, and always very generous and validating. So I don't think, in many respects, we would be at the point we are now in time if Ralph had not been there early on and had continued to be there as we've moved the ball forward. And so, yeah, I could go on. Again, I carry Ralph in my heart. He's been a wonderful friend, wonderful mentor, and always there when I needed him. So when I feel I need him now, I can call upon him. And he's out there in the spirit realm. The spirit realm he talks so often to us about and taught us about. And he is right up there along the first rank, along with my parents, as who I call on in a time of need. Now, after he passed, and I will say, it was not a surprise because I knew that pulmonary fibrosis is a very, very serious illness and for which there is no treatment, but it was a shock, and it really hit me to the core, and it has taken some time to kind of get balanced and grounded again. But in the early days after he passed, a whole lot of, there are some email threads I was on of friends, colleagues, people who love Ralph, and many of whom are here today. And there was a poem. I wish I could recall who had sent it out, but it's a very short poem of Ralph's that I'll share with you. It's called Shaman Song, and here it goes. This is by Ralph. During the first half of my life, I wove the threads and textures of my experience into a multicolored tapestry that in the ending half of this journey has become a magic carpet on which I shall sail away over the mountains into the worlds of the mystery. Now, we miss you, Ralph, but you will be with us. And we move the cause forward. Thank you.
I'm Vicki Darrow, and Kathy asked me to read some of Ralph's poems because he always enjoyed hearing me read his work aloud. And I decided I would say one sentence of how do I know Ralph. I would say that together with many of us who are here today, Ralph, Kathy, Jim, many of us, we really loved our tribe, and we raised our children and our spouses and our families together with open hearts and open minds. So, both the poems I'm reading are from Diving for Treasures, and the first is titled Sky of Love. It is the fulfillment of an ancient dream, unknown before this love of ours. Out of darkness, hearts trembling with fear, ecstasy comes. The light shines clear now that we're falling free, hands linked above through the immeasurable sky of love. Kathy wanted me to read that one twice, so I'll do it. And then I have one more. Sky of Love. It is the fulfillment of an ancient dream unknown before, this love of ours. Out of darkness, hearts trembling with fear, ecstasy comes. The lights shine clear now that we're falling free, hands linked above through the immeasurable sky of love. And then the second poem I'm going to read actually will be a repeat because it's what Charlie read, but that's okay. Nice to hear it again. And it is called The Shaman Song, as Charlie said. And of course, it really is very meaningful to, again, many of us are here, and of course, remembering also Ralph's childhood in Germany and all the things that, again, many people here have experienced throughout our life, and we continue on with our open hearts and the baby. During the first half of my life, I wove the threads and textures of my experience into a multicolored tapestry, dancing with images of beauty and terror. Now, in the ending half of my journey, this has become a magical carpet on which I will sail high over the mountains into the radiant worlds of boundless mystery. And my words at the end are just that I'm sure all of us will agree that Ralph is certainly sailing in the radiant cosmos. Thank you.
Ralph began composing songs late in life. So we invite everybody to, in just a moment, to stand up because we're going to sing and dance in Ralph's favorite style. And this is a 4/4 rhythm, and we're going to demonstrate it before we play it. Please play the Bardo Blues.
When I woke up this morning, coming out of a dream, I looked down at the body lying on my bed. That's when it hit me, I was actually dead. All my family and friends gathering in my room. Ahead there is a tunnel and a way so bright. Keep on moving upward, moving toward the light. I'm coming through the Bardo. I'm coming through the Bardo. I don't know if I'll make it. I don't know if I'll make it. Or make it through alive. Or make it through alive. I've got the Bardo blues. I've got the Bardo blues. Then I saw peaceful spirits, and I trembled in awe. Spirits that were angry, I was struck with fear. The teachings I remembered, the middle way was clear. Now rebirth is coming, mother, father are joined. I'm aiming for a human life, looking at the wheel. As the worlds are turning, this is what I feel. I'm coming through the Bardo. I'm coming through the Bardo. I don't know if I'll make it. I don't know if I'll make it. Or make it through alive. Or make it through alive. I've got the Bardo blues. I've got the Bardo blues.
how do you follow that? Huh? Yes. My name is David Presti. I teach neuroscience-y type things at UC Berkeley. It's really a privilege to be here. Thank you so much. I love that song. It's so quintessential Ralph, mischievous and heartfelt and profound all at the same time. In our culture, as we all know, we avoid talking about death, deny death, run from death. And we've created this worldview, which is grounded in our scientific certainty, where reality is at its foundation non-living matter, made of electrons and quarks and Higgs bosons and stuff like that. And life is some kind of transient configuration of this non-living matter. And so in this dominant paradigm, we're molecular machines. And death is when those machines cease to work. The gears stop turning, our bodies fall apart, and then there's nothing. Now, this is not a scientific fact. It's an assumption. And if we're a bit more honest, perhaps a hypothesis, but it's usually elevated to some kind of dogma. When Ralph landed at Harvard and after some time connected, perhaps karmically, probably karmically, with Leary and Alpert, and was introduced to the Tibetan teachings on death, he really got it. And he continued to work with those teachings for the rest of his life. The applicability of the Bardo teachings to negotiating the challenges and opportunities of daily life, their particular applicability to the trajectory of a psychedelic journey, and the profundity of their applicability to the after-death realms. Some say the Tibetan teachings on death constitute a body of literature on the subject unequaled in any culture, past or present. And some have said that this literature is in a very real way scientific, based on observational investigation over millennia of death and birth and life. Ralph, in his beautiful little book on the life cycle of the human soul, now a chapter in his bigger, beautiful, big book, The Ecology of Consciousness, writes this: the Earth space-time dimension is the most restrictive and arduous of all the dimensions in which our existence unfolds. We recognize this every time we experience the dissolution of time, space, and materiality when we visit the inner realms in dreams or visionary states. The difficulty stems from the fact that a human incarnation in the time-space-matter dimension is generally more or less cut off from the awareness of its spiritual origin and essence. Ralph was a true shaman. He figured out really well how to practice his craft effectively in the contemporary Western world. He excelled in scholarship, teaching and writing the language of the academy, and while at the same time ardently searching for the philosopher's stone and distilling his findings into alchemical instructions that facilitating connecting with the realm of the spirit, that all too often neglected realm, which is right here, right now, and is, in fact, the true source of healing. And our disconnection from that, the deep source of distress. So thank you, Ralph. It's been a privilege to be your friend and student, and your contributions are epic. So many seeds were planted by Ralph, sprouted, ever sprouting and growing in ideas and individuals. And Ralph created lots of mantras. We've already heard one. There's another printed on the back of the program as a toast. And here's another one, another mantra of guidance that's always applicable, especially when times might get rough. Stay connected with your intention and your ancestors, those who have gone before, those who have mapped the terrain, your ground, and your light. Really good medicine. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Monica Wickman, and I'm deeply honored to be with you. And Kathy and Sophia, I want to thank you both for including me in the people who would be honored today. Unlike Kathy, I do not have a fire moon. I have a water moon, and I am sure this will be accompanied by tears. Hence, the only person I've seen to have Kleenex in hand. I kind of want to start backwards, which is a bit of a yoga thing to do. I'm from New Mexico, and I have had the great honor of Ralph being a mentor, teacher, friend. It's hard to believe I'm standing here in this moment, so I'm catching up with myself. If you can give me a moment, I'll get there, a bit like Diane. In about 20 some odd years ago, I had the honor of getting a chance to drop in to deep work in shamanic circles with Ralph in potentiated and unpotentiated states, and I stayed his student for over 10 years. I work as a Jungian analyst, and at the time I met Ralph, I had already initiations in the depths of the psyche around critical illness, and dreams and active imagination were a force that led the way to spontaneous healing. And I'm here because of these dimensions being open. And these dimensions are open with us now, as we know. And I think to start really with the light, fire, yoga reality, the reality of the divine sun above our heads, here now, that Ralph is part of, and that his soul and spirit and strength are part of. And I was wondering about us just for a second, closing our eyes and just using the imaginal field and opening our lenses of perception to perceive that sun of eternity that shines above our troubled world and over the top of each of our bodies and our psyches, the crown chakra realities that blossom into the eternal, that Ralph so loved to introduce us to. So, in honor of you, Ralph, tuning in to the golden sun of the Agni fire of light, fire yoga, and the way you healed your soul in that lineage and kept teaching us light, fire yoga, we welcome, Ralph, your present strength and beauty and creativity and humor and soulfulness and ordinariness right into the bones of ourselves, Ralph, to these moments that Kathy and Sophia have opened for us to share in the celebration of your exquisite soul. Dropping that energy just into the heart field now, taking a breath into the heart center, the flower of the heart center, where Ralph lives in each of us eternally. So you can open your eyes again. I have a few things I'd like to share that stand out for me about Ralph's life. And I doubt other people would land on these pieces. I see Ralph as a profound Chiron being, a profound Chiron being. You know, Chiron was conjunct his Mercury on the entrance to the 7th house. Kathy knows this much better than I do, and we've had fun over the years conferring with charts and angles on our lives. I've so appreciated knowing Kathy as well. And looking at Ralph's Chiron in his chart, he communicated with the Mercury straight out of his own initiatory processes. And as a man, integrating his own journey with his voice and his experiences for real into his real human life stands out in a very shining way for me as Ralph is moving into the next dimension. I had the privilege of interactions with Ralph in the last year of his life that will always remain with me. They'll always remain with me. So, dear, he was capable of catching on a dime pieces about himself he hadn't seen over his whole life, and when he got it, it was like lightning right into his heart and soul, and instantly in his actions, his words, and his deeds. Up to the moment he left, he was working as a Chiron figure, integrating his own initiatory experiences into the soul of the human life. Now, you know the story of Chiron, I'm sure, the mythic pattern of the Greek centaur who is head of all of the centaurs, and he ends up in the myth with a stray arrow from Hercules' bow that lands in his back hoof. And when it lands in his back hoof, none of the deities can help him. None of the great shamans, they're all called in, and no one can help Chiron. So he has to crawl off into his cave alone, an introverted, deep, sacred space, to see if he could find a way to connect with the invisible realms to find his way to heal. And of course, Chiron, inside his deep, cavernous place, he comes out with an apothecary of healing arts. And this is an active archetype in our world today, and Ralph is a great leader in the Chiron explosion of gifts that come when we contact Source through working with the wound. In the last year of his life, Ralph reflected back with me in a very tender way, looking back at when he was a teenager. And his teen years are something for us to really consider about the soul of this man. And he writes about it beautifully, exquisitely. And you can pick this up. It's the epilogue in one of his books. I'll tell you more about it here in a second. He writes about when he was a teenager in World War II. And this is what tells us about his Chiron journey that lasted his whole life, which I see everything he ever did is integrated into. Everything, Agni Yoga, psychedelics, shamanism, alchemy, dreams, everything he touched was part of this sourcing the source through dealing with where the wound is, diving into the depths of the psyche and psychoid, getting experiential contact with the healing dimensions of different dimensions of reality, integrating those and coming back to the earth plane, coming out to the apothecary as the Chiron myth goes to give the gifts also to others and help others learn to heal. So if you look into Ralph's teenage life, his wound with World War II was extraordinarily deep, and he talks about it beautifully. And in the last months of his life, when he reflected back on it, he was really loving that teenage boy who during the war was taken out of Germany to go to school in Scotland. Now, you may know the story even better than I do, but as he is in Scotland, he is learning the English language. The boys will have nothing to do with him at the boys' school. He can't connect with anyone. He's wildly alone. He's carrying the shadow of the Holocaust. He's dreaming about it. He's thinking about it. By the time he leaves that school, he's had a series of dreams and visions from the angelic realm where the angels were imparting energetic transmissions of light and pattern onto the earth in front of him. So here he is suffering, World War II, German kid, sitting in Scotland at a boys' school. No one's talking to him. He's completely and utterly alone. He goes to the scholastic side of himself. He's in the library. He's working in the library, studying like mad, reading. That whole side of him blossoms. He's carrying his wound best as he can, and the portal opens, and these presences are bringing into the earth plane energy that I believe would last his whole life long. So then, of course, he ends up at Oxford, and when he's there, he is focused deeply on his work with the Holocaust, and he finds out in the best depth psychological way a human can that his personal shadow is tied into the collective shadow of the times. And this is what makes me really think about the integrity of Ralph's journey to the end of his life, because he untangled, hello.
At 4 o'clock, there's a tollway on both sides of Franklin out in front of this church.
Okay.
So,
Would you like to say that more?
yeah, I would like to say this one more time. If anyone's parked out on Franklin Street, it's a tollway from 4 o'clock on both sides of the street. There's about 10 cars out there. I hope it isn't somebody's of ours.
Okay, thank you. Little word from Hermes. Many people needing to go move their cars. I'll be brief. I know we've got to complete this, but I really do want to honor at a soul level the power of what came through Ralph when he untangled his personal shadow from collective shadow in World War II. He used various means to dive into the depths of the psyche experientially to discover how to do this. And as Jan had said earlier, he was absolutely a clinical psychologist, a depth psychologist, an ego psychologist. And he shows the model for when we're tangled with the conflicts of what's going on collectively, how to literally untangle our human piece, just our piece, from the great shadow so that the human soul can flourish and also so that the collective unconscious can heal and change. This remains a huge piece for me of his work. If you pick up his book on the Well of Memory with Mimir in it, you will see in the epilogue he speaks to this, and I highly recommend a way to just cherish and love Ralph's journey as a wounded healer is to read that epilogue. It's just stellar as a depth psychological being who lived very much through the processes of initiation to reintegrate into being a beautiful human being. And the way I got to witness those pieces at the end of his life, as I say, will always stay with me. I want to close with 2 pieces. I know we're in a rush. There's a piece on Odin that we really ought to have some time with for a second, and I think he'd appreciate it if we did. Because if you look at the mythic pattern of the Nordic myths that he was so deeply interested and involved in, his initiatory energies that happen in the depths of psyche and psychoidal dimensions really held the energy of these deities. And the Odin story in its 3-part way that he gets into in many of his books, he's speaking about the first part. He has to sacrifice voluntarily to hang on the root of the world tree, which turns itself upside down, turns the hero upside down. And as Odin is now hung by the Norns, the 3 fates, he's hung upside down and he's conferring with them, and only they will let him down when the time is right. He has to, and he voluntarily does, sacrifice an eye into the vat below. And what happens, very interestingly, when this goes on, not only is he released, but the eye that goes into the vat below lets the Norns turn the tide so that the symbolic world will awaken. And the symbolic world awakens, and in this moment, it's the runes. It's the first symbolic communication from the invisible to the visible worlds. Now, we know this about Ralph. We know this is what he did. He deeply held that. He lived his life in deep connection with these energies. He did hang upside down on the root of the world tree, and he did get his eye in the vat and learn the symbolic worlds. And he brought that out as teacher, poet, songwriter, shaman. So many ways he brought this alive. Now, why is this important in this moment for me to say that piece? It's because another piece of this story with Odin is that he drinks at the well of Mimir. And when he drinks at the well of Mimir, inspiration and connection to Source and the deities happens. What do we know about Ralph's life? Outrageous creativity to the very end. This is a man who drank from the well of Mimir. And his storytelling, if you've never heard Ralph do storytelling, I will hope that you will be able to access that, because in a potentiated or non-potentiated state, when Ralph would drop into storytelling, the dimensions of the psyche would come so fully alive. You're inside the story with him. And Ralph is a second world creator in these moments. In these moments, Ralph is a second world creator. His consciousness is helping weave the brand new world forward and the evolution of consciousness that the alchemists called the unus mundus, that Ralph's life was so devoted to. So the last piece I'll end with is that in the myth of Odin, the third part is that the gods of the Vanir and Asir are warring, and they're in horrible conflict, and they will stay warring through eternity, except for Odin plays a role in getting them to work out a vessel for reconciliation. And out of the vessel of reconciliation, the warring turns into love, and a unique being is born, a being of great wisdom. Now, this is, of course, Jung's work, and Ralph quotes Jung in these places about the coincidentia oppositorum. When the opposites of warring and love come together, the new world is possible. Ralph dedicated his life to this, and his writing still to come has pieces about this as he's working with the warring gods. I was honored that he asked me to write a piece for that book, and I will be conferring with Kathy about that. This part about the way the conjunctio, the new unity of evolving consciousness, is worked out among us with polarity coming into third eye, crown chakra realities, our world depends on, our beautiful world depends on. So, in honor of beloved Ralph, wounded healer, guide, friend, magician, ordinary dude, totally ordinary, which I love so much knowing that about Ralph the last year. I want to just thank you all for being present with me and me with you. And I know you have your own stories to share, and I hope to hear them at the reception. Thank you.
I'm George Goldsmith. I knew Ralph as a co-conspirator as well. I first met him on December 9th, 2013. It was this amazing night here in San Francisco. Richard Rockefeller and Larry Brilliant were talking, and it felt like a coming out party almost, a place where we could discuss this work and so forth. And in the back of the hall where that happened, Ralph was sitting with his new published book, The Toad and the Jaguar. He was so excited about the therapeutic potential of this. Monica and I share emotion. That first meeting was the beginning of a friendship that helped change the direction of my life and the health and well-being of my family. It was really beautiful in the sense that Ralph at that point was really embracing elderhood. He was encouraging me. I was feeling a little bit like it was too early for elderhood for me, but he was really just wonderfully embracing it. And so I think that at that point, we've really benefited, our whole family, from the times we shared with Ralph in different parts of the world and really different parts of consciousness. It was beautiful. Our time together was really too short, but we had a sense of connection that really transcended space and time. And for those of you who know Ralph, you can imagine all those wonderful conversations that morphed into conversations and explorations of past lives. Looking forward, we envisioned a world where healing from these medicines could be widely available to reduce unnecessary suffering. And when we had dinner, our last dinner together in February, he was really happy to see that starting to happen with all of the Renaissance. It was really wonderful that he got to see that. And as Ralph says, and like that. I'd like to end with to honor Ralph with a translation of a poem by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. I loved how he used to read poetry to us. This is called Eins und Alles. One and everything. To find yourself in boundlessness and vanish as a separate self brings dissolution of distress. No more wishing, no wild wanting, no vexing claims, nor strict demands. Instead, a joyous giving up of self. Soul of the world, come permeate my being. In wrestling with the spirit of the world, we find our nature's highest calling. We're led by spirits with compassion, by highest masters gently guided to the one creating everything. To recreate what's been created prevents defensive hardening, the ceaseless doing of our lives. For what was not, now it will be. These radiant suns and brilliant earths, always changing, never resting. There's movement and creative doing, self first forming, then transforming. It only seems a time to stop. The eternal moves in everything, for everything must fall to nothing in order to remain in being. And so it is, Brother Ralph.
Hello, as many of you know, my name is Sophia, and as my dad would say, I am so grateful to see you all today. It is with profound honor that I stand before you to speak about my father. I am grateful to have shared such a deep connection with him in his lifetime. His love of learning, his profound connection to nature, his ambition, his deep intellect, studious personality, and deep compassion and tenderness for helping others are qualities I've cultivated in myself due to his influence, and I will forever carry them on as his legacy. Some months before my dad passed away, he compiled a book of all the dreams, visions, reflections, and stories that he had recorded or gathered over my lifetime that were related to me and to our father-daughter connection. I want to share with you one of these excerpts. This is as written by my dad in this journal. This is the conversation between Sophia and I when Sophia was 6. While I am driving her to school, she asks me, "Do you know me?" And I say, "Yes, I've known you for 6 years, and even before you were born." This same conversation occurs 2 more times over the next couple of days. In the third of these conversations, I say, "I even knew you before you were in Mom's tummy." And she says, "Oh no, you did not." And I say, "I knew your spirit." And she says, "Oh well, my spirit, of course." I share this with you because I think it so accurately reflects what I learned throughout my life from my dad, that our spirits are always connected, and that even when the physical body is no longer present, my father's spirit is forever alive and connected to each of us. On the days leading up to my father's death, I had many sweet moments with him, sitting by his side, holding his hand, and being present. It was heart-wrenching, sad, and overwhelming to experience his rapid decline. I was grateful for every single look in his eyes, every kiss and hug, and every time we greeted and said goodbye. He would say, "Here she is, my beloved daughter," and as I departed, "I love you, Sophia, and I always have and I always will. I will always be your dad." This is the letter I wrote to my dad about 4 months before he died. Dear Dad, you are my beloved father. You have given me an incredible life, a life of learning, laughter, love, and letting be. You have taught me to love unconditionally, to accept what is, to be present in the moment, and to always be the best that I can be. You have taught me to be honest, humble, and responsible. You have guided me through the most challenging times of my life. You've always been my teacher and my guiding light, taught me to connect with the deepest parts of myself and to get in touch with my own inner wisdom and strength. And you have taught me to connect with others, those who have passed, in deep ways. I know how deeply cherished you are by your friends, colleagues, and students for your incredible wisdom, and it is an honor and privilege that you are my father. My memories of our times together in my childhood are forever imprinted on my heart. I cherished our walks and hikes together. My love for the outdoors, exploring parks, and hiking were inspired by our time spent together in nature. I remember you reading to me every night, especially the Berenstain Bear books. We wrote a children's story together, which will be forever a cherished memory and a physical memento for me. I cherish the memory of playing board games together with Eli and Mom. I appreciated the patience and dedication you had for helping me with difficult and challenging schoolwork and for encouraging my academic success. I particularly remember you helping me to understand the Odyssey and Siddhartha in high school, and you were so steadfast in supporting me to learn, grow, and achieve. When I went through periods of anxiety, you guided me, reminding me that I was loved, speaking to me only with kindness, heart, and understanding. I appreciated in these moments the therapist in you and your ability to help me learn to cope and stay grounded through challenging situations. I loved our family trips and our father-daughter trips, and I'm grateful to have experienced many places in the world through our travels together. My most treasured memories through our trips to Scotland, Germany, and Italy, to visit the places where you spent your childhood and young adulthood. And then we visited the sacred Damanhur community in Italy. You have been blessed in your lifetime with many wonderful friends, as is evident here today. I feel grateful to have been introduced to so many of them personally by you. You touched the lives of countless people, most profoundly Eli, Mom, and myself. You are a most remarkable man, and I am blessed to be your daughter. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for giving me this special life and for supporting me, loving me, and teaching me. I love you and hold you in my heart as I go forward in my life, always making you proud. Thank you.
My name is Lee Mars, and I've served on the board of Green Earth Foundation for 13 years. It's been an honor to do so with Kathy, my husband Michael, Kate and Jack Silver, Uwe Dorkin, Joseph Friedman, and Sophia Boart. We're all deeply committed to Ralph's legacy, his spoken and his written legacy, though today, what's astonishing is to bear witness to his living legacy, the one held in ourselves, in our collective memories, and our shared stories. I have two things to share with you. First, I'll speak of Ralph's impact. Beginning with his impact here, if I may. If not for the intensive healing work I did with Ralph, there is no way I would be happily married today, or happily anything today, but I very much am. And the same is true for my husband. If not for Ralph, we would not have chosen to become parents to the soul that chose us. Without his guidance, so many wounds would remain raw and untreated, or worse, hidden. And we are but two people, now three. Ralph teaches us to heal our inner landscapes and our outer landscapes, including Mother Earth. He teaches us to heal backwards through the multi-generational trauma of our ancestry and forward through the future generations. I know that many of you gathered here have been touched just as profoundly by Ralph's presence in your life. Whether he offered you healing or vision, guidance or challenge, or most likely, all of the above. To begin to glimpse the true impact of Ralph had in this lifetime, let us expand the aperture of our awareness, as Ralph would say, to include those who did deep personal work with Ralph, those who were mentored by Ralph, who we are so grateful for, are carrying forward his legacy, those who attended his classes, those who've read his books, those who will read his books, and even those who may never know his name, but who benefit from his pioneering spirit and his brilliant mind. Ralph Metzner altered our collective consciousness. He expanded our awareness. We are forever changed for the better. The second thing I'd like to share is an understanding that came to me while I was sitting in silence with Ralph's body after he passed. Ralph personally found solace in and had access to a myriad of mythologies and wisdom traditions, though at the end of his life, there were two simple practices that Ralph lived full out. I'm going to reiterate those. The first practice, forgiveness. Ralph left clues all around his bedside, notes to self. He was working with a Hawaiian practice of forgiveness called Ho'oponopono, in which you bring someone or something difficult to mind, and you offer these 4 phrases. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. The second practice, the mother of all practices, gratitude. As Kathy and Sophia shared, and Eli, Ralph radiated love and appreciation at the end of his life for his hospice workers, for his babysitting co-op friends who brought him soup, for his dogs, Nubia and Piper. And Piper, he was not always grateful for Piper's barking. But at the end of his life, he got it. Piper was protecting him, and he was grateful for that. But most importantly, he turned way up his gratitude for Kathy, for Sophia, for Eli, and the joy he felt at his newborn grandson, Gratian. There is a signature to forgiveness and gratitude when turned up full throttle. There's a glow and a glorious perfume that saturates the walls and hangs in the air. In the end, the practice may be this simple for living a rare and beautiful death. Give and offer forgiveness. Express your boundless gratitude. For these lessons and so many more, we thank you, Ralph.
Hi, my name is Jamie Faust, and I'm here to simply offer a meditation I have learned directly from Ralph. It's rooted in many of his essential teachings, and it's called The Cave of the Heart. I feel that the best way that I can ever acknowledge Ralph is to be able to share the things that he's taught me. So I hope that I won't cry too much. I do miss him quite a bit. And although I have not been his daughter, I certainly have felt that I may have been one in another lifetime. I definitely thank you, Kathy and Sophia and Eli, for allowing me to be here. And thank you, Alan, for introducing me to him. So please close your eyes. And with your intention, focus your awareness to about 6 inches above your head, to the star of light that exists there as your point of individuation from the all, from the pure lands. With your intention, ignite this star of light so it expands 3 inches in diameter. Allow this place above your head, this star of light, to remind you of the divine being that you truly are. Imagine that it exists over you at all times, at all moments, that you are always available to be able to touch into this place so that you will remember your light. Now, with your left hand, place it upon your heart center. And imagine now that this great energy of clear, crystal light, this high frequency light that hovers just above your head, begins to descend downward through your throat and into your heart field. Your heart field here is bordered by your ribs, the collarbones, the diaphragm below, and it creates what Ralph called the cave of the heart. This heart space now can hold the light from above as you extend a golden strand of awareness upward now to that pure, high-frequency point of light above your head, letting it come down into the center of your own heart, your own human heart. Letting it hover there as you imagine a multidimensional lens of high-frequency light existing in 360 degrees direction, front and back, up and down, all the way into the core of the earth, out the left side of your body and out the right. Just from this center of your own heart space, this 6-armed cross of light exists that you can exude and emanate throughout your whole life, throughout your whole being, so that you carry your own heart fire, your own light fire within you at all times, simply with your intention and attention to access this awareness. And breathing deeply now, letting your breath allow the beams of light that exude from you, from the cave of your own heart. Let this awareness and empathy for yourself, compassion for others, come out from these beams of light that come out from your body, from the cave of your own heart. Letting yourself now imagine as we come down again into this cave-like structure, this room, this heart space. We call it so many different things, but the cave of the heart is such a beautiful image. So we can create this place, this room within ourselves that's always accessible, always portable. And I would like you to imagine with me, with your thought intention, that in this center of your heart space, there are now 2 empty chairs that you visualize. And you let yourself take a seat in one of them. And as you get comfortable, and if you wish, you may invoke Ralph to come and sit beside you. You may ask him to come and sit just as he was, or just as you recall him, perhaps the last time you've seen him. Perhaps as a younger man, or as a joyful image that you keep in your mind's eye about how he looks. Perhaps as he comes to sit in this chair, he comes not as a being, a human being, but perhaps as an energy form, a being of light. Perhaps he shows himself as a color. Or perhaps as a spirit animal, like one of his, wolf or raven. Perhaps he doesn't show himself to you visually. Perhaps you hear his voice in that delightful cadence in the way he spoke. Or perhaps even with your own direct knowing, you just simply feel his presence. Breathing and allowing. Allowing and breathing. Letting whatever essence of this being, this human being that we knew of as Ralph Humphrey Gunther Metzner was to us. And we acknowledge him now with gratitude. Dear Ralph, thank you. And to yourself, silently or aloud, whatever you're moved to do here in this room, as we have all been speaking of him and feeling our gratitude, we could, if you wish, say these words aloud or to yourself. Dear Ralph, thank you. Dear Ralph, thank you for your service to my soul. Thank you for your service to my soul. Thank you for your service to my soul. Thank you, Ralph. When my time comes, we will meet again. Thank you, Ralph. When my time comes, we will meet again. Thank you, Ralph. When my time comes, we will meet again. Dear Ralph, you will always have a place in my heart. Dear Ralph, you will always have a place in my heart. Dear Ralph, you will always have a place in my heart. And you allow your chin to bow down as you take a few moments here in your own personal way to say fare thee well to our beloved friend and teacher and guide, father, husband, uncle, nephew. And if you wish to, as he taught us very well, you may ask him if he will be your guide. But you must ask. And as you ask, you must also ask him how he will show himself to you. In what form will he take? Or if it's formless, how will you know? And take the time in these moments to ask, if you would like. Now allow your chin to come back up, your breath to become full, your awareness of this place and time, knowing that you can come back here anytime to the cave of your own heart and have a conversation with him. Anytime. And now you allow him to fade back into the spirit world, where he rides on his magic carpet. And slowly and gently open your eyes. Come back to the here and to the now. And so it is.
And so it is.